"You're going to the facility whether you want to or not." He stood by the dining room window, arms folded, waiting for me to break, perhaps expecting tears or pleas. But I did neither. I stayed still, silent, only watching him. I wondered quietly if this was truly the same son I had raised, the child I had once nursed through pain, the one who clung to my robe during his nightmares. How does love turn so cold? I didn't answer, not because I had nothing to say, but because if I spoke, everything inside me would pour out. He sighed, irritated by my silence, and said he couldn't keep supporting me, that I was making his life harder, that his wife was exhausted, that this situation wasn't fair to anyone. He spoke as if I were some burden, an unpaid bill, or an old box taking up space. He didn't raise his voice. He spoke calmly, and that calmness cut deeper than anger ever could. I could only think, what did I do to deserve this? But he, like most people, has no idea what a mother keeps inside. I walked to the kitchen as though nothing had happened. I boiled water and made coffee, though my hands trembled, not from fear, but from the effort it took to hold back my tears. I sat down, took a slow sip, and heard him in the next room talking on the phone. He said the assisted living facility had a vacancy. He'd handle everything. It would all be settled in 2 days. 2 days. That's all it would take to be rid of me. I gripped the edge of my mug and thought about the years, the good ones and the hard ones. The times I went hungry so he could eat, the sleepless nights I spent tending to his asthma, his fears, his bad dreams. All that I gave, all that I was, now reduced to a decision made without me. I had sensed this day coming, not exactly like this, but I saw it in Marcus's eyes months ago. In how he looked at me with quiet irritation, in how our dinners grew silent, in how his bedroom door closed as soon as I passed, in how his wife treated me like a guest whose visit was nearly over. But those words, "You're going to the facility," that was the final blow. When he returned to the kitchen, I had finished my coffee. I asked softly if he wanted me to make dinner. He looked puzzled, maybe expecting tears or shouting. Maybe he wanted me to beg, but that woman no longer existed. I didn't cook. I went to my room, shut the door gently, sat on the bed, and decided that from now on, if anyone was going to make choices about my life, it would be me. Marcus doesn't really know who I am, or who I was. He forgets what it took for me to reach this point. He forgets that before being his mother, I was a woman with dreams. That I once danced in the rain, loved deeply, had my heart broken, and rebuilt my life from nothing. He forgets this house isn't his. I built it with my own 2 hands. For 30 years I managed a local bakery, working 6 days a week to pay for every brick, every window, every flower outside. I slept only 4 hours a night. I never asked for anything, not even gratitude. But memory, I suppose, becomes selective when it's convenient. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling, remembering everything. The first time I saw this empty lot, full of dust and dreams. The day I carried baby Marcus home wrapped in a yellow blanket. The Christmases, the laughter, the fights, the reconciliations, all the life this house had witnessed. And now, he wanted to send me away as if I were an inmate. I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I refused to give him that power. The next morning, I rose before anyone else. I made breakfast, just as I always did. Marcus came downstairs, his face showing the same mix of rush and detachment. He told me he had to go out. He told me to handle some paperwork and said we'd talk later. I nodded. When he left, I went to the closet. Not to pack clothes, not yet. I was after something else, a small wooden box I had kept for years. Inside were my most valuable possessions. Documents, deeds, my will, and some hidden savings. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. There were also letters, photographs, and old newspaper clippings. I sat on the bed with the box on my lap, and for the first time in a long while, I smiled. He thinks I'm weak. He thinks he can make choices for me, but he doesn't know everything I've survived, or what I'm capable of. I closed the box and put it away. I needed to stay calm and think clearly. It wasn't time to act yet, but the game had begun. And this time, I would be the one moving the pieces. That night, I pretended to be tired and went to bed early. From my room, I could hear Marcus talking to his wife. They said the place was nice, that it had a garden, that it was well maintained, like they were describing a vacation home, not my life. As if a mother were just an object to set aside somewhere comfortable. I pulled the blanket up to my neck, not from cold, but from their disdain. The thought of leaving no longer hurt. What hurt was that they believed they could make that decision without me, but they would learn soon enough. The coming week would change everything, and this time, I would have the final say. I remember the day Marcus was born as if it were yesterday. The sky itself seemed to know something important was about to happen. The doctor told me he took a deep breath right away, as if demanding the world with that first cry. I thought it meant strength, that it was a sign of life. I didn't realize it was also a warning. From a young age, Marcus was demanding. He didn't cry out of need, but out of will. He didn't want what he had. He wanted what he couldn't have. But I, blinded by the love of a first-time mother, did everything to please him. I worked long hours at my tailoring business to buy him the sneakers all the neighborhood kids wanted. I even took on debt to send him to a private school, hoping it would keep him away from bad influences. I sacrificed sleep, comfort, and peace just to see him succeed. When his father, Robert, passed away, Marcus was only 15. It was painful for both of us, but what hurt me most wasn't the grief. It was how Marcus began looking at me as if I suddenly knew nothing. As if with his deepening voice and broadening shoulders, he had become the man of the house, and I was just in the way. "Don't cry so much. Mom, he had to die of something," he said one night while I held Robert's pillow. From then on, things changed. He stopped asking for my opinion, stopped telling me where he was going, and spoke to me as though I were just a servant in his home. Still, I kept forgiving him. "It's just adolescence," I told myself. "He's mourning his father." I continued cooking his favorite meals, washing his clothes, waiting for the day he might hug me again like he used to as a child. But that hug never came. Years passed. Marcus became a successful businessman, got a good job in the city, and moved out. I stayed here, in the home Robert and I built brick by brick with so much effort. Every corner holds a memory, a story, a piece of us. I thought that once Marcus was settled, he'd visit. Maybe share a cup of coffee, ask how I was doing. But his calls grew rare, his messages stopped, and when he did come, he was always in a rush. He'd glance around the house, check his watch, and leave. What hurt most wasn't his distance. It was the way he looked at the house. Like a buyer inspecting what would soon be his. One day, without warning, he said, "Mom, you should think about selling this place. It's old, and you can't maintain it alone." He didn't meet my eyes. He spoke as if it were a business matter, not something that cut through me. He knew what this house meant. It's all I have left of Robert, of our life together. I didn't respond. I just nodded and poured him more coffee. That's when the pressure started. Weekly calls. "Mom, did you go to the notary?" "Mom, I know someone interested in buying." "Mom, it's for your own good." Every time I hung up, I felt a little more of myself fade away. I clung to my daily routines, my plants, my sewing, my walks. But his ambition cast a shadow over everything. Every drawer I opened felt like I was preparing to vanish. One afternoon, as I watered my roses, he arrived. New car, tailored suit, expensive cologne, and that same cold expression. "I've already talked to Attorney Sterling. If you don't sign the papers, I'll have to take other steps. This house will be mine whether you like it or not." Something broke that day, but not in me, in him. Because while he spoke, I didn't cry, argue, or plead. I just looked at him. And in that silence, I think he realized I was no longer the fragile woman he believed me to be. That night, I locked my door and pulled out the old ledger where I'd recorded every expense since Robert died. How much did his education cost? How much had I invested in this home? How many times had I given up something for myself so I could give it to him? Each number was a wound, each entry a reminder of sacrifice. And that night, I finally understood something that hurt more than all of it. My son didn't love me. He only wanted what I would leave behind. So I made a decision. I wouldn't give him anything. Not a wall, not a chair, not even a flower pot. The next morning, I went to the market, walking through the streets with a quiet determination. Every step felt like part of a plan just beginning to take shape. I met Mrs. Evelyn Reed, the retired notary, and asked, "Do you still handle estate matters?" She looked surprised, then smiled. "For you, Thelma, of course." That's how my preparation began. I gathered all my papers, titles, receipts, records. I even found an old letter from Robert stating that this house would always be mine. Weeks passed. Marcus didn't call and I didn't mind. I stayed silent, knowing sometimes the greatest rebellion is to say nothing at all. A month later, he returned, arrogant as ever. "Mom, I've made the decision for you. You're going to the facility whether you like it or not." And that's when I knew. It was no longer just greed. It was contempt. And that was the final straw. I came home that afternoon with a heaviness in my throat, as if a stone were lodged there and would never go away. There was something in the air, something not new, but now thicker, harder to ignore, like a fog that no longer pretended to hide. It was Marcus's contempt, my own son's. I felt it in the dirty plates he left behind, in his raised voice every time he spoke, in how he avoided my eyes as if I were just another piece of furniture in the house. But that night was different. He didn't shout, didn't throw things, didn't insult me outright. What he did was worse. He sat quietly across from me at the dining table while I finished serving dinner. His silence was cold, unsettling. Then, without looking up, he said, "I've already spoken to Mr. Dawson. Everything's arranged. The house will be in my name, and you'll move to the facility, whether you agree or not." I said nothing. No sigh, no tears. I calmly placed my napkin on my lap, though inside I felt something close in on itself, as if my spirit were shrinking in fear. But in that silence, I was also making a decision. I didn't sleep that night. I walked the hallway over and over, shadows stretching along the walls like silent witnesses. How did we end up here? I wondered. When had my son become someone who looked at his mother with such indifference? But reflection wasn't enough anymore. The next morning, I began doing something I hadn't done in years: writing. I took out an old notebook and began recording dates, names, and events, as though my life were a case that needed to be reviewed. I remembered the original house deed locked away in my closet. More importantly, I remembered something else. I hadn't signed anything yet. The transfer wasn't final. Legally, the house was still mine, and if Marcus thought I would just give it up, he was mistaken. I started taking quiet steps. I sold a few antique silver pieces my mother had left me, then some old jewelry I hadn't worn in decades, all discreetly, without raising suspicion. Marcus still believed I was the same submissive woman who cooked and cleaned without protest. But that version of me was gone. A day before his next meeting with the attorney, I overheard him speaking on the patio phone. He didn't realize I was behind the curtain. "Yeah, everything's ready," he said. "The old lady doesn't talk back. She just cooks and wanders around like a ghost. No problem. We'll sign in a week, and I'll start the renovations. I'm redoing the whole kitchen." I didn't cry, but that phrase, "the old lady," cut deeply. Not mom, not mother, not the woman who raised me. Just the old lady. That was the moment I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I had to protect what was left of me, what he couldn't take away. The next morning I got up early and went to the bank. I opened a new account under a different name. I changed passwords, made copies of important papers, and reread the house deed line by line as if it were a mystery novel. That's when I noticed something I'd forgotten. A clause that allowed me to cancel any transfer if coercion or abuse could be proven. I held onto that page as if it were gold. The daily humiliations didn't stop. Marcus always found new ways to make me feel small. Sometimes he ignored me completely. Other times he'd drop grocery bags onto the table like I was his servant. No words, just orders and cold stares. One night, when the tension in the house felt almost physical, I made his favorite dinner, smothered pork chops with rice, just like when he was a child. Some part of me still hoped that the taste might bring back a memory. A laugh, a hug, a trace of the boy who once clung to my skirt seeking comfort. But it didn't. He took one bite, and that was all. He tasted the dish once and said coldly, "This is bland, just like you." I didn't freeze because of the words, but because of his tone. There wasn't any anger left in it, just complete indifference, as if I no longer existed. That's when I realized I couldn't keep going through this alone. Someone came to mind, the only person who ever spoke to me kindly whenever we met at the market, even though it had been years since we'd last had a proper conversation. Serena Hayes, my neighbor from down the street. She had cared for her ill mother until the end, and had often offered to help me when she saw me struggling with bags. We weren't close, but there was something genuine about her, a quiet kindness that reminded me goodness still existed. I went to find her. My heart raced as I walked to her house. When she opened the door, her hair tied back and her apron dusted with flour, I simply said, "I need to talk, and I don't know who else to go to." Without hesitation, she let me in. I sat in her warm kitchen, which smelled of freshly baked bread, and I let everything spill out, every word, every hidden bruise, every long night of silence, every small act of contempt. Serena listened quietly. She didn't interrupt or offer easy comfort. When I finally stopped, she took my hand and said words that still stay with me. "You're not alone. And you don't have to give your life to someone who doesn't value it." Something changed in me that day. I went home different. My posture straightened. I walked taller. For the first time in a long while, I had a plan, one that was truly mine. Marcus noticed. He eyed me suspiciously, but said nothing, just frowned and went back to scrolling through his phone. I smiled quietly, knowing his control was slipping and my freedom was near. Serena kept her promise. She didn't just help once. She became a steady presence in my life. She'd visit often, discreetly, as if she understood that even a whisper in my house could cause trouble. Sometimes she brought homemade bread. Other times she simply sat beside me on the patio, watching the leaves fall. Her calm companionship eased the weight I carried. One afternoon, as we made strong coffee together, she looked at me with steady eyes and said, "Thelma, if you ever decide to leave, I'll help you go anywhere. You don't need to tell me when, just tell me that you're doing it." I didn't respond right away. I just watched the steam rise, as if my thoughts were hidden in it, but inside something was awakening. For the first time, I believed I could not only escape, but start over. That night, I opened the drawer with my important papers. I pulled out the deed to the house and stared at my name, Thelma Price. It was still mine. Everything was still intact. I hadn't given anything away, and I wouldn't. I started gathering what I'd need to disappear. Documents, small amounts of money withdrawn carefully to avoid suspicion, my birth certificate, bank records, an old gold chain that had belonged to my grandmother. I hid them all in an empty cookie tin beneath a false bottom in my dresser. No one would know. Meanwhile, I continued the routine, setting the table, cooking as usual, pretending everything was fine. Marcus seemed preoccupied, busy with his calls and plans for investments and renovations for a house that wasn't even his. But soon, I noticed something unsettling. He was watching me. He'd show up in my room suddenly, pretending to look for a pen or his keys, but he'd linger, his eyes scanning the drawers and shelves. He was searching for something, though he didn't know what. I felt constantly observed, so I became more cautious. I memorized where everything was, took photos with my old phone to make sure nothing moved. Every action had to be deliberate. Then Serena suggested something I hadn't considered. "My cousin lives near Asheville, North Carolina," she said. "She has a quiet place and doesn't ask many questions. You could start there?" I stayed silent. The name echoed in my mind, Asheville. It wasn't just a place. It was a promise, a chance to breathe again. And how would I get there? I asked softly. "I'll drive you," Serena said without hesitation. We planned carefully. Every step had to be exact. No room for error. The plan was simple. One Friday morning, while Marcus was at his regular meeting with Attorney Sterling, I would leave quietly through the back door with a single suitcase and meet Serena on the corner. She'd have everything ready, the car, the route, the silence. I made sure to leave everything behind in order. The house would look untouched, neat, almost like an inheritance left behind. Just walls and furniture, nothing personal. I had already started selling valuable items slowly, the ones Marcus wouldn't notice missing right away. I sold my mother's porcelain dinner set, a few pieces of heirloom folk art, and an oil painting that had hung in the hallway for 2 decades. Each sale felt like saying goodbye to a piece of my past, painful, yet freeing. I tucked the cash safely into envelopes hidden inside my purse lining. If everything worked as planned, I'd have enough to live independently for a while, to ask nothing from anyone. But as the days passed, I noticed Marcus growing restless, uneasy, and suspicious once again. He asked me, "Have you been to the bank recently?" I denied it calmly, keeping my expression steady. "Why?" I asked. "I'm not sure," he said. "I just feel something strange is going on. I want to be certain you're not signing anything without telling me." The irony was unbearable. He, the one secretly trying to take the house from me, was worried that I might be doing something suspicious. "I don't have anything to sign, Marcus. You know I don't handle those matters anymore." I lied. His eyes searched mine, sharp and suspicious. But he let it go. Then, just 2 days before my planned departure, something unexpected happened. A small accident. I was putting the last documents back into my hidden box when a receipt slipped out and fell to the floor. At that exact moment, Marcus walked in and saw it before I could retrieve it. He picked it up. It was a receipt for the sale of an antique figure. My name wasn't on it, but it had a delivery address. "What's this?" he asked. "It's old," I said quickly. "I found it in a box. It's nothing." My heart was pounding so hard I could barely speak. He stared at me for what felt like forever, then silently placed the paper on the table and walked out. He didn't come home that night. When Serena found out, she called immediately. "We're moving it up," she said. "It's too risky to wait." So the day before the original plan, I packed my things, a single suitcase. I left a letter on the dining table beneath a vase. It wasn't a farewell. It was a statement. I wrote that the house was never his, that I hadn't signed anything, and that he no longer had my permission or my silence. "Everything you destroyed in this home," I wrote, "can't be repaired with new walls. And now that I'm gone, you'll finally understand. A mother's presence is worth more than any fortune." That was my last line. I didn't sign it with love. I simply wrote my name, Thelma Price. When Serena arrived to get me, I didn't cry. I closed the door firmly and didn't look back. The sky was heavy with clouds, but I felt warmth, like sunlight on my skin. Freedom. We drove away quietly, no music playing. The road stretched far ahead, but for the first time in years, I didn't care where it led. I only knew I wasn't going back, and that the man I'd once loved, the monster I'd raised, would have to face life without me. The car moved slowly along the back road, tall trees swaying gently on either side. Serena kept both hands steady on the wheel, and I stared out the window as if seeing the world anew. Behind me was the house. Behind me was Marcus, and behind me was the shattered version of myself that had survived too long. Neither of us spoke. Some silences don't need words. Mine was filled with images, thoughts I never shared, and tears I had swallowed for years. Serena's silence, I think, was one of understanding, the quiet of someone who knows what's being left behind. Meanwhile, back at the house I'd left like an empty shell, Marcus returned to his golden prison. He parked in the driveway, unaware of anything unusual. He entered, still talking on the phone with that sharp, businesslike tone he used to close deals that were never as honest as he claimed. He passed through the living room, not noticing the vase or the letter beneath it. He poured himself some water, kicked off his shoes, and sank into the armchair. Then it hit him, the silence. A different kind of silence, not the usual one. Not a mother's quiet. Out of habit, he heard another sound, heavier, deeper, echoing through the emptiness. He stood up and walked through the house, calling my name 2-3 times. No answer. He went upstairs and found the bedroom empty, not messy or ransacked, just empty, as if the spirit of the place had vanished. He came down slowly, and as he passed the table, he noticed the letter. Reading it while standing, His brow tightened. First in confusion, then in anger, disbelief, and finally, that expression men wear when they realize something they took for granted is gone. He tore the paper, threw it on the floor, and kicked the vase, shattering it against the wall. "You have no right," he yelled. At no one, at a woman already gone. He checked the closet, opened drawers, and saw what was missing. Jewelry, documents, the house deed folder, cash envelopes, all gone. For the first time in his adult life, he felt fear, not of losing possessions, but of losing control. He called my phone, once, twice, 20 times. The same message every time. "The number you have dialed is not available." He called his contacts. Some didn't know, others wouldn't tell. He even tried reaching Serena, someone he had always underestimated. She didn't answer either. That's when the real breakdown began. For days, he drifted through the house like a restless ghost, replaying the letter in his head, rewriting it with anger. He told himself I'd come back, that it was just a tantrum, that I couldn't live without him, that I was too old to start again. But each night alone, every cup of coffee he made himself, every unpressed shirt, built an uncomfortable certainty inside him. This time, I wasn't coming back. Then came the investigation. He went to the bank and found that small amounts of money had been withdrawn for weeks. He had never noticed, always assuming I was careless, never imagining I could hide anything from him. He went to Attorney Dawson and demanded to know if there were any legal actions on the property. Dawson, uneasy, said I had only requested a certified copy of the deed. Nothing else. No transfers, no signatures, so it's still in her name? Marcus asked, voice tight. Yes, Dawson replied. Everything still belongs to your mother. Without her signature, you can't sell. Legally, you have no rights. That was the moment Marcus realized he hadn't just lost me. He had misjudged me. He began asking neighbors if they knew where I'd gone, but no one said anything. He even went to Serena's house, knocking repeatedly, but no one answered. She had been gone for days, too. That enraged him further. He began drinking, not violently, not dramatically, just quietly, in front of the television tuned to shows he didn't watch. Bottles emptied silently, food lost all taste, and his days blurred into meaninglessness. In that emptiness, he started seeing the house differently. It had once been his prize, his early inheritance. Now it was a prison, its walls reminding him he didn't know how to cook, wash clothes, or sleep without someone lowering the TV volume. One morning, he woke to find dust covering the living room. The fridge was empty, there was no coffee, and the bathroom smelled stale. That's when he broke down, not with loud sobs, but a low, quiet cry pressed between clenched teeth. For the first time, he felt something new, abandonment. That was the true revenge. Not the papers, not the money, not the letter, but my absence. The absence of a mother who had always been there, even when he didn't deserve it. The one who endured contempt disguised as humor, commands disguised as advice, and coldness disguised as care. I hadn't just left the house. I had left behind the burden, freed myself from my oppressor, and that destroyed him inside because no matter how much he shouted or raged, he couldn't make me return. Each night, as he locked the door and the television murmured into the dark, he began to understand the last line of my letter. A mother's presence is worth more than any money, and that presence is no longer yours. We reached the edge of the town just as the sky turned deep orange. It wasn't a tourist place or anything special, simply quiet enough for a broken woman to learn how to breathe again. Serena turned off the car and looked at me with that familiar mix of tenderness and strength. She said nothing. She just waited, letting me take my time before stepping out. I walked slowly. My legs trembled, not from weakness, but because each step felt like a choice, an act of quiet defiance after years of emotional control. I crossed the threshold of the small, single-story house we had rented. It wasn't luxurious, but it was free of ghosts, and that was enough. The air smelled faintly of old wood and fresh cleaning. The open windows let in the soft rustle of the wind. Stepping onto the floor felt like reaching solid land after a long shipwreck. I sat down on the lone dining chair and let out a shaky, unexpected laugh. Serena handed me a glass of water and sat across from me. "You're here," she said, as if it were a grand victory. And it was. "Yes," I replied. "I'm here." That night I didn't sleep. Not because I was restless, but because my body didn't know how to handle so much silence. No footsteps in the hallway, no sharp words, no hidden criticisms, just the night and me. And that was my first free night of insomnia. The next few days were uncertain. Learning to live without fear takes time. The first times I went to the market, I kept scanning faces, half expecting danger. Smiling felt foreign, not for lack of trying, but because I had forgotten how to smile from within. Serena was patient. She stayed near, gave me room. Sometimes she cooked without being asked. Other times she simply read while I stared into space, lost in thought. And she was right. I didn't become rich or well-known. I didn't start a foundation, but I found something better. Myself. I never wrote books or did anything extraordinary, except perhaps the hardest thing of all, learning to live without guilt. I discovered how to dance by myself, to eat without rushing, to look in the mirror without searching for flaws. I learned to listen to my own voice and trust it, to fall asleep with a peaceful heart. And at my age, that's a quiet revolution. I no longer ask myself what might have happened if Marcus had loved me differently. I've realized that love, when it must be begged for, becomes a cage. Today I move through life lightly. Today I am unafraid. Today I know that I was a mother, but I am also a woman. And above all, I am free. There came a day when I had to choose between comfort and obedience. I chose neither. I chose silence, and then I chose life. I sold everything, not out of revenge, but as a reminder, to him and to myself, that a mother's presence holds more value than any amount of money. And if he ever hears my name again, let it not be for what I gave, but for what I refused to lose. Thelma Price, woman, mother, and now the owner of her own life. Did you like my story? If you stayed until the end, drop a 1 in the comments. If you enjoyed it, please like the video and consider leaving a small tip to support my work. I share many more life stories like this one on my channel, so don't forget to subscribe and explore them. 2 new stories are already up on screen that everyone's been loving. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.